In the early 20th century, the land that would become Saudi Arabia was a harsh desert kingdom where survival was the daily struggle. Most people lived in small villages, relying on herding, subsistence farming, and pearl diving along the Gulf Coast. There were no skyscrapers, no highways, and almost no schools or hospitals. Literacy was rare, infant mortality was high, and life expectancy was low. Poverty was widespread, and the global powers of the time paid little attention to this vast stretch of desert. Yet beneath the sand lay a treasure that would transform not only this land but the entire world: oil. Before the oil discovery, the economy depended on very modest activities. The most important was the Hajj, as Muslim pilgrims traveled from across the world to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Pilgrims brought trade, culture, and revenue, but it was not enough to support large-scale development. Other activities included small-scale agriculture in oasis towns, camel caravans transporting goods across the desert, and pearl diving in the Gulf waters. Still, most families lived at the edge of poverty, often struggling to find enough food or fresh water. It was a world far removed from the glittering skylines we see today. Everything changed in 1938. In the eastern region of Dhahran, American geologists working with the Standard Oil Company of California struck oil in commercial quantities. The discovery was historic. Suddenly, the desert kingdom had something the world desperately needed. As World War II loomed, global demand for oil skyrocketed. Saudi Arabia, once seen as isolated and poor, became strategically important. Tankers began shipping crude oil abroad, and their revenues transformed the financial foundation of the kingdom. At first, the impact was limited. The country had almost no infrastructure to extract, refine, or transport oil. American companies, through what became Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company, brought technology, equipment, and expertise. Oil camps were established in Dhahran and Ras Tanura, creating small hubs of modernity in an otherwise undeveloped land. Saudi workers learned new skills, from drilling to mechanics, and the first waves of modernization began. Roads, housing, and ports were built to serve the oil industry, laying the groundwork for larger national development. The 1950s and 1960s saw the true beginning of the transformation. Oil revenues grew dramatically, and the government started to invest heavily in basic infrastructure. For the first time, large-scale road networks connected cities that had once been isolated. Airports were constructed, linking Saudi Arabia to the wider world. Modern hospitals and schools were established, improving life expectancy and literacy rates. What had been a collection of desert towns was turning into a modern state. The capital, Riyadh, began its evolution from a small desert city into a modern administrative and political center. Jeddah grew as a commercial hub, while Dhahran became the heart of the oil industry. The government also began building institutions to manage the new wealth. Ministries were created, civil service expanded, and economic planning became part of national policy. The monarchy used oil revenues to provide services, subsidize food and fuel, and build infrastructure, establishing the foundations of the modern Saudi welfare state. For citizens who had known poverty for generations, the change was astonishing. Electricity lit up homes, cars replaced camels, and televisions entered living rooms. The country's image shifted rapidly from backward desert to modernizing state. By the 1970s, Saudi Arabia was on its way to becoming one of the richest nations in the world. The oil boom of that decade, fueled by the global energy crisis, multiplied revenues to unprecedented levels. With this wealth, Saudi Arabia financed massive development projects, universities, hospitals, highways, and housing complexes spread across the kingdom. The Saudi rial became strong, and the kingdom's financial influence reached beyond its borders as it invested oil wealth abroad. Aramco expanded its operations, and by the late 1970s, Saudi Arabia had become the largest oil exporter in the world. But with this rapid transformation came challenges. The sudden influx of wealth created social pressures. Cities expanded quickly, sometimes faster than infrastructure could handle. Millions of foreign workers arrived to support construction, oil production, and services. Saudi society, once isolated, now encountered diverse cultures and influences. While modernization improved lives dramatically, it also created tensions between tradition and modernity. Questions about identity, culture, and the balance between development and heritage began to emerge. Still, the achievements of this period were extraordinary. In less than 4 decades, Saudi Arabia had gone from poverty and scarcity to prosperity and global significance. Oil had changed everything: the economy, the cities, the daily lives of citizens, and the country's place in the world. Yet even at the height of the oil boom, some leaders began to ask, what would happen if oil prices collapsed? Could the kingdom sustain this growth forever? Those questions would become more urgent in the decades to come. The 1980s brought both prosperity and warning signs. Oil prices, which had soared in the 1970s, began to fluctuate wildly. When prices collapsed in the mid-1980s, Saudi revenues dropped dramatically. Projects slowed, budgets tightened, and the kingdom realized just how vulnerable it was to global oil markets. The oil curse, dependency on one commodity, became clear. Leaders knew that the future could not depend on oil alone. Diversification became a priority, though progress would be slow. In the 1990s, Saudi Arabia faced additional challenges. The Gulf War in 1991 highlighted its geopolitical importance but also strained its finances. The cost of hosting allied forces and ensuring regional security weighed heavily. Meanwhile, the population was growing rapidly, creating pressure on education, jobs, and housing. Still, the government continued investing in infrastructure, expanding universities, hospitals, and transportation networks. Saudi Arabia entered the World Trade Organization, signaling its intention to be part of the global economic system. Despite efforts, the economy remained tied to oil. Whenever prices were high, revenues poured in, but when they fell, deficits emerged. This cycle continued into the 2000s. However, Saudi Arabia also began building one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, the Public Investment Fund, PIF. This fund invested oil revenues into global assets, from American stocks to European companies, as a way to prepare for a post-oil future. The 2000s also saw modernization in daily life. Internet and mobile technology spread quickly, connecting Saudi youth to the world. Shopping malls, airports, and skyscrapers reshaped cities like Riyadh and Jeddah. The Kingdom Tower in Riyadh and other iconic projects symbolized ambition. But even as modernization spread, questions about long-term sustainability remained. Could Saudi Arabia reinvent its economy before oil demand declined? The real turning point came in 2016 with the launch of Vision 2030, spearheaded by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This was not just a development plan, it was a bold reimagining of the Saudi economy and society. The vision aimed to diversify income sources, attract foreign investment, and create jobs for a young and growing population. It set ambitious targets, increasing non-oil revenue, boosting tourism, developing entertainment industries, and fostering technology and innovation. Megaprojects were announced that captured global attention. NEOM, a futuristic $500 billion city, was planned as a hub of innovation and sustainability. Within NEOM, the line promised to revolutionize urban living with a car-free, zero-emission city stretching 170 kilometers. Qiddiya, near Riyadh, was designed as a world-class entertainment and sports hub. The Red Sea project aimed to turn pristine islands into a luxury tourism paradise. These projects signaled that Saudi Arabia was no longer content with being an oil exporter. It wanted to be a global center of innovation and investment. Tourism became a central pillar of diversification. For decades, the kingdom had been closed to most international visitors, with tourism focused almost exclusively on religious pilgrims. Vision 2030 opened the doors to the world. New visas allowed tourists to explore Saudi heritage, from the ancient Nabatean city of Alula to the modern skylines of Riyadh and Jeddah. Festivals, cultural events, and international sporting competitions drew millions of visitors. Tourism quickly became one of the fastest-growing sectors of the economy. Technology and entrepreneurship also gained momentum. Saudi Arabia invested heavily in artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and digital infrastructure. The kingdom positioned itself as a hub for tech conferences and startups, with initiatives to support young entrepreneurs. The Public Investment Fund invested billions into global tech giants while also funding domestic innovation. Renewable energy projects, particularly solar and wind, signaled a commitment to leading in the global transition to clean energy. Cultural transformation accompanied economic change. Entertainment, once limited, expanded rapidly. International concerts, film festivals, and sporting events became regular occurrences. Formula One races, boxing matches, and football tournaments brought global attention. Social reforms allowed greater participation of women in the workforce and public life, unleashing new potential for growth and innovation. Saudi youth, the majority of the population, became the driving force of change, eager to embrace opportunity while preserving cultural identity. Today, Saudi Arabia stands at a crossroads. It remains one of the largest oil producers in the world, with vast reserves and global influence. But it is also racing to build a diversified, knowledge-based economy. The challenges are real: global competition, fluctuating oil demand, and demographic pressures. Yet the progress is undeniable. From futuristic mega-projects rising in the desert to booming tourism and technological innovation, Saudi Arabia is reinventing itself at astonishing speed. The story of Saudi Arabia is extraordinary. In less than a century, it has gone from poverty and desert villages to global wealth and futuristic ambitions. From pearl divers and farmers to engineers building smart cities, from caravans crossing the desert to high-speed trains linking modern cities, the transformation is breathtaking. The question now is not whether Saudi Arabia can survive beyond oil. It is how far it can go in shaping the future of the region and the world. The kingdom's journey is proof that with vision, leadership, and determination, even the harshest desert can bloom into prosperity.